Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for having us here today to present at Innovators in Healthcare. Lynn and I are here at Kirkhouse Care Home in East Belfast, and we will be given a two-part presentation today. So I will talk from Chromalighten's point of view in terms of the design of the daylight simulating luminaire and sensor and how we trialed this and some of our preliminary results. And Lynn will then go on to introduce Kirkhouse Care Home and about her experience with piloting the technology, both from the aspect of care staff and from the residents themselves. I'm sure all of us here are familiar with the benefits that daylight has on human health and well-being, so much so that I haven't included a slide on the impact of light on and IPRGCs because I'm certain that it's been covered in a lot more detail in the presentations before this. But in terms of well-being of people living with dementia, often, particularly in the context of lighting studies, when we talk about well-being, we refer to being in terms of aspects of well-being that light impacts, so agitation, mood and depression, sleep-wake cycles, and rest activity. And often these will be measured with tools such as the Cohen-Mansfield Agitation Index, the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, and various other quality of life scales. But in the last decade, there has been a rise in the use of sensing technologies. Commonly worn will be wrist-worn accelerometers, which can monitor rest activity cycles, and cameras which monitor fall detection, although there's a bit of a privacy issue there. Fast infrared technology for mobility and activities of daily living, and pressure sensors to monitor sleep-wake cycles and falls. But with people who are living with dementia, because they are a vulnerable cohort, they sometimes have issues with being comfortable with having a piece of equipment on their person. And so we need to find ways to be able to monitor their aspects of well-being without increasing levels of their agitation. In terms of the gold standard and monitor well-being in terms of light, melatonin suppression is the gold standard measure, but it comes from saliva samples, so it's not always feasible to collect. With chroma lighting's aim, we wanted to be able to present daylight simulating luminaires, but also to be able to monitor well-being in terms of sensing technologies that are going to be unobtrusive. So we decided to use ceiling deployed sensing devices and luminaires in order to monitor this. Here you can see our prototype technology. We have quadrant LED boards that are both dimmable and tunable white. So they have both cool and warm channel outlets so that you can change the color temperature and the intensity of the lighting throughout the day. In the center of the device is the central aperture with a millimeter wave radar sensor. So we're able to monitor the 3D positional coordinates of a person over time in relation to each luminaire. On board of this is a Bluetooth low energy module, which allows all of the luminaires and sensors to talk to each other in a mesh network. And then we place a Bluetooth low energy gateway within the care home so that we can harvest all of the lighting information, but also all of the sensing information. But anytime we can see what the lighting output is and what the prospective behavior is, analyze this on a local server. So what we did was we programmed daylight simulating lighting as the same for every resident from the hours of 7 in the morning until 6 in the evening. And we had higher intensity, cooler lighting during the day with lower intensity, warmer lighting at night. In terms of the sensor component, as you can see here, we had a 3D depth penetrating sensor, which shows the positional coordinates of a person over time. We can see their XY translations, but we also have insight into depth. For future iterations, we will be able to monitor fall detections. As an example, in the grid here, you can see when a person is sitting or when they're pacing in a circle, and because it's just following that point coordinate, it's privacy friendly. When talking about sensing technologies in previous lighting studies, as I mentioned before, there's wrist-worn accelerometers are typically employed to monitor rest activity. And some of the metrics that they pick up are interdaily stability, intradaily variation, and relative amplitude. What we did was we created algorithms that basically can create these same metrics so we can compare the studies. So we have algorithms that monitor the rest activity of the residents, their time in bed metrics, how much time they spent in bed during nighttime hours, how many disturbance counts they had, and how long these disturbance bouts would have lasted for, alongside location trajectories. So again, if we know the output of the light in terms of its intensity and color temperature, and we know the location of the residence with respect to the light fitting and whether or not light switches are turned on or off, we can get information on the relationship between light and being for each resident. In terms of chroma lighting's side of things, this was our lighting design concept. So we have that integrated device which has the luminaire and sensor, and then we just wanted to be able to test it in a care home so we could see how this works in a real life environment, which is where we came onto the collaboration with Lynne and Kirkhouse. I'll pass on to Lynne to talk a little bit about this.
Over the years, Kirkhouse has participated in a few studies with Ulster University, all to do with the innovation in care. In 2019, Chroma, Lynne and Kate contacted Kirkhouse and myself about a study to do with lighting design for people with dementia, and we immediately were intrigued. After meeting with Lloyd from Chroma and Kate, and seeing what they could do and how it would benefit people and our residents with dementia, we agreed to go forward with the study. We delivered a group discussion with staff and relatives, and Lloyd and Kate delivered a fantastic presentation to explain the benefits and what was expected from all involved. Kirkhouse is part of BCA Belfast Central Mission, which is an agency of the Methodist Church. Belfast Central Mission was founded in 1889 as a response to problems from inner Belfast and all to do with inner city life. Today, BCM continues to meet the needs of the whole person, spiritual, emotional, social and physical, regardless of class, creed or ethnicity. Its current services include community services, housing support for young adults, housing support for young people aged 16 to 25, housing support for older people, which is us here at Kirkhouse and also in Copeland's, therapeutic counselling, accommodation for older people, parent support projects, and we do Christmas programs and volunteer programs throughout. Self-opened in 1993, specially designed so that residents felt that they were in their own home and not just a bedroom. Our values are excellence, respect, integrity, and people-centred. We have 42 flatbooths which house up to 46 residents. In 2014, we opened Memory Lane, a 9-bedded dementia unit delivering person-centred care. When designing Memory Lane, we consulted with Turley University's recommendations in dementia design, and we received the Gold Standard Award for Dementia Design that year. We also developed the Buttons model of care, delivering person-centred care in a household theme. We are also the first dementia care unit in Northern Ireland to use the music and memory therapy, and all our staff have been trained in best practice in dementia care through Stirling University.
In order to trial our technology within a care home, we had to go through OREC-NI, so the Office for Research Ethics Northern Ireland. And we did recruitment via Lynne, who was the gatekeeper, who then recruited the participant and family members, and we gave them information sheets and consent forms. And finally, at the end, we had 13 people who expressed consent, but 11 participants included in the analysis. We did a 16-week trial. So the first 4 weeks of these were a baseline study where we kept the pre-existing lighting levels the same. So we kept the same colour temperature and illuminance as was in the pre-existing light fittings. And this is for 4 weeks. And then for the following 12 weeks, we introduced that daylight simulating lighting. And for each of these weeks, we asked care staff to fill out a QualiDem report, which is a quality of life scale for people living with dementia, so that we could have a comparison of static lighting versus dynamic lighting. So here you can see the floor plan. As Lynne described earlier, each of the flatlets has a living area, a bedroom and a bathroom. And in each of these, we place one of our devices with both the sensor and the luminaire, and a Bluetooth gateway then close by to the luminaire so that we could access all of this information over there. Here's an example of what the installation looked like. So if you look on the left-hand side, these were the old fixtures in each of the flatlets in Kirkhouse. So I think the colour temperature here was about 3000 kelvins. And we matched this with our light fittings at the beginning of the study. We had to do this instead of keeping the original light fittings because we needed the sensor component in order to collect that being data. In the image on the right, you can see the difference between different times of the day and what phase of the daylight cycle this lighting is outputting. So at noon, you can see that it's at that cooler colour temperature and higher intensities, similar to a midday blue sky. And both at dawn and dusk, we would have had these lighter or these warmer colour temperatures with lower illuminances, as you can see here. Again, just a reminder for data collection, the sensor was able to collect the nighttime metrics, so we could get an insight into the total time that was spent in bed during the nighttime hours, any disturbance counts, so any times that they left the bed, and the total amount of time that these disturbances occurred for. And again, this is from the sensor algorithms that we created, so we could identify the bed location and then identify times of exits and entry points and count for how long these lasted. In terms of activity, again, from our radar sensor, we were able to create, with knowledge domain, we were able to create algorithms to get these intradaily stability, intradaily variation, and relative amplitude metrics. Again, these give us an insight into wrist-worn accelerometers and similar metrics that they would publish. And it essentially gives us an idea of how well aligned your circadian rhythm is with the light-dark cycle. And then finally, we have the well-being scales that I mentioned earlier. So they were collected once a week for 16 weeks, both during baseline and intervention weeks, so that we could understand aspects of well-being that we couldn't get from the sensor. For example, care relationship, positive effect, negative effect, your mood, restless behavior, and social isolation. What we were able to find from our preliminary findings was that the median number of nighttime disturbances decreased. The median bout length of nighttime disturbances also decreased, and the median total amount of, this says total amount of sleep in hours, but it should say total amount of time spent in bed because we can't assume that they were asleep, increased by 45 minutes from baseline to weeks 5 to 10, and increased by 27 minutes from baseline to weeks 10 to 16. In terms of rest activity patterns, these patterns were very heterogeneous between individuals, but we can see that there was a statistical significant improvement in all three of these aspects from baseline to weeks 5 to 10. And from baseline to weeks 10 to 16, there was also a statistically significant improvement in the interdaily stability. In terms of the quality results, so the well-being scales that we asked care staff to fill out, we found a statistically significant improvement from baseline to weeks 5 to 10 of three of the parameters. So these were B, positive effect, so positive mood, G, which was social isolation, so there was a reduction in this, which we can also see from the location trajectories of each individual spending more time in the common areas, and also H, which is a sense of feeling at home. So there was an improvement in that as well. So our initial analysis from this 16-week trial was that dynamic lighting in this context does have the potential to support well-being in dementia, with seemingly stronger influence in earlier weeks where the dynamic lighting initially follows the static lighting, and then it continues to aggregate as marginal gains over time. So we seem to see this biggest contrast as soon as we put the dynamic lighting in and the biggest improvement, and then it continues to improve at a slower rate as time goes on. I'll pass on to Lynne to talk a little bit about effects on residents.
So our positive effects were our residents were more settled during sundowning hours, which previously we had great issue with. We're having less residents up through the night distressed. Our staff feel that they have a better relationship with the residents. And the residents are more focused during activities. Negative effects could be because the lighting is temporary. There have been a few issues with lighting switches as they're Bluetooth, which can cause a delay in transmission. 2 of the light fittings were further away in the building, so the signal wasn't that great. The idea of this kind of lighting is amazing, and the explanation and delivery have been outstanding, ensuring that everyone from staff, residents and relatives were fully understood the aspects of it and what we were hoping to achieve. One point I would like to make is that I feel this lighting needs to be in place when a care facility is being built and not just as a temporary measure. There are no limitations as time was built in at the start of the study to resolve any issues with the lighting. I would recommend the use of daylight stimulating lighting to assist sundowning and the natural flow of the day. Our experience with the very positive one. We felt very well supported from the start, and it's still going on.
In terms of future for lighting design for dementia, I believe that we need to include people living with dementia in aspects relating to their lighting. There's a 2024 position statement from the CIE, which state that we need to do a lot more research on integrative lighting, particularly for the ageing generations. So I'm looking to do a study that includes people living with dementia in interviews to talk about their interaction and their perspective of lighting so that we can better inform lighting policy for their future.
And I would love to see this kind of lighting in all care homes. I don't feel it needs to be just based on dementia care. I feel even that from this study, I myself have made changes in my own home.
Thank you very much for your time and attention.
John, anything to add to that?
It just warms the cockles, doesn't it? It's absolutely wonderful. It's just fantastic experience out there. He's right. It's a shame that it's a temporary one and we just want to see it there forever.
So Sarah has kindly asked whether this was just a one-off or it's going to be in there for a while.
Yeah, for sure. So initially we had put our ethics through for the 16-week study, that 4-week baseline and 12-week intervention. But after the study, we went back to Lynn and we had a lot more ideas about extending it over the season. So we would have summer and winter data as well. Because when we initially put it in, it was from March to July. So we wanted to do a longitudinal study and see if what we saw initially as those like marginal gains over time did continue into the winter season. So we put an amendment in for the ethics with Lynn's permission because she was happy enough with the technology. And we've extended it now for a 3-year period. So the lights for now have the permission to be in there, both from ethics and from Lynn's point of view, until July 2026.
So in the last sort of 5 minutes or so, perhaps you could just share a little bit more about where you see that going and maybe how the collaboration with Lloyd is going there.
Yeah, for sure. So what I probably didn't show you behind all that architecture is how the light and the sensor actually connect together. So we have a Lighten API where in time when we do, as John and Shelley and all the other speakers today were talking about, there's a lot that we need to learn about different parameters and how they affect lighting. So we have the existing infrastructure there and architecture where when we know more about it, we're able to, based off sensor responses and being so rest activity and fleet wake cycles, we can push demands or rules out to the lighting so that we can change different aspects of its intensity or its color temperature. So we have that infrastructure intact. It's just we haven't implemented any of the changes yet because initially this was a 16-week project and we don't know enough at the minute until we gather that sort of baseline data on long term. I think if we have it until July 2026 and we have maybe over a year's worth of information and we see we can cluster information based on, say, rise times or sleep times and we see common patterns, then possibly we can implement via that architecture these outputs in the lighting. But the difficulty is, again, this study is based on 11 residents within one care home. And again, it comes back to funding and making these larger scale trials so we get more information that it can then be solidly based on and we can back up that we know what we're doing when we're making changes to the lighting. Because at this point, okay, I have an inference, but is it actually evidence-based yet if we don't have enough people type of thing?
Lloyd, do you want to just chip in there?
Basically, we started up Skyjoy as a separate company in order to develop this technology. Skyjoy was started by myself and Dr. Pamela Topping, who you know. And the idea is to bring it to market all over the world. So the data we gather from the sensor will feed into our understanding of human response to light. And then we can use the system that we've got using reliable Bluetooth technology and then feed that information back to the luminaires and hopefully improve our luminaires' performance for people living with dementia.